Alright, moving on to next in our list then, and next in the list we have the sturdy Dwarfs. Now, a lot of people don't like Dwarfs, they find them boring to play against, but they're not such a bad race. They're actually a good race to play. They have a couple of weaknesses, but overall when you get the hang of them, they're not actually that bad. But I think they're actually one of the harder races to learn, even though they look on paper like they're going to win every single game. But they have some very, very difficult weaknesses to deal with. Quick correction as well from the last week. I said that Pass and Sure Hands both gave +1 to their respective skills. They don't do that at all. That was I misspoke when I said that. Pass gives a free reroll on any inaccurate or failed pass, and Sure Hands gives a free reroll on a failed pickup. So, sorry, I made a mistake when I was talking. Anyway, on to Dwarves. Let's see what Cyanide has said about the bearded guys. Incredibly strong and enduring. This is very true. They have very good armor value, and they almost all have thick skull, which means that they actually get help stopping them from getting injured. I'll have a look at the skill when I get there, though. But they are very strong, and they are very enduring, no doubt. Made for defense and exhausting the enemy. That's very true. Dwarf's main strength is in defense, but it's very difficult to learn how to defend with them, because they're not very fast. And it can cause new coaches major problems. And in terms of exhausting the enemy, I don't think you can rely on that tactic, but it's certainly something that can happen. You can win a fight of attrition for sure. It is kind of what dwarves do, but with some races it's pretty difficult to rely on that tactic. They can be any kind of opponent when it comes to a fight. This is kind of half true. I said, for example, that dwarves are a bad matchup for orcs. They are, I stand by that, but at the same time orcs do have a strength advantage over them, with the black orcs at least. So, and Khemri, for example, is the same issue. Anything that has a lot of plus strength pieces, it's quite difficult to wear them down, actually. Though you can still outblock them, which is the main strength of the dwarf team, because you start off with a lot of block. So at least at first, this is relatively true. As swift as snails, their weaknesses, yes, they have a really big problem in their movement 4, which means that you really have to learn how to position with dwarves. If you can't position, these are the best team to learn how to do it properly with. Just going to move the computer, sorry. They're the best team to learn how to do it with, and also they're the team that are really going to punish you if you can't do it well already. Basic players are expensive even if they're good. This is true. That's why most people suggest starting with a full roster on the dwarf team. And this weakness is rather strange to me. The Death Roller is not the most easy managed big guy. I think the problem is that he gets sent off after the first drive. We'll talk about that in a bit. But in terms of big guy, he's actually not so bad to manage. It's just that you always have to roll him. That's the only problem, really. But anyway, what we said then, dwarfs... There's a typo here, interesting. Dwarfs seem to be ideal Blood Bowl players, being compact, tough, well-armoured, and having a stubborn knack for refusing to die. Most successful dwarf teams work to the principle that if they can take out all the other team's potential scores and wear down the rest, then there won't be anybody left to stop them scoring and winning touchdowns. This is a cute and funny piece of fluff, but that's not actually the way to play dwarfs. You can't rely on removing players. That's not really a legitimate tactic in Blood Bowl, hoping that the entire team is gone. So, dwarves work in a similar way to orcs, where you slowly make your way up the line and basically bash your way a hole and completely protect your ball at all times. That's the best way to dwarf. Alright, and let's make a team then. Let's cross over in games for a minute, because I know this name is free. Or at least it was last time I chose it. And yes. And just having a little quick look at the colours. We'll take this ugly thing. There we go. And we'll play in Orzammar. Doing a quick crossover. So there are 5 pieces in a dwarf team. Let's look at them individually. Starting with probably... The Death Roller has no body still. That's really weird. Starting with the Troll Slayer, who is one of the more fun. I wouldn't say he's one of the key pieces, though a lot of people say that he is. The main problem with the Troll Slayer is that he has low armor value for the dwarfs, and also he has Frenzy, which is kind of strange on a dwarf team because you don't really want pieces to be getting away from you. You want to have better control over them. So the Troll Slayers are actually the hardest member in the team to manage, basically because you'll often find they get themselves out of position just because they move twice when they tackle. So they have block, which almost all dwarves do, and I've spoken about block before, so we'll leave that alone. And Fixed Skull. This player treats a roll of an 8 on an injury table after any modifiers have been applied as a stunned result rather than a KO'd result. Yeah. Basically, this is more helpful on an armor value 7 piece because it makes it makes 7 rolls into a stun instead of a KO, which is very useful on a thing like a skeleton, for example. On a dwarf, it's kind of weird. It gives them a whole new kind of table, which is quite interesting. But basically, this means that they're more likely to get stunned than KO'd slightly. That's all it does, but it does help. Dauntless, which is interesting and quite close to the fluff of the Troll Slayer. To explain it briefly, because that's quite long, when you hit something that's bigger, stronger, and uglier than you, you get a chance to increase your strength to equal to the equal strength of the opponent that you're punching. So for example, if you punch a strength 5 piece and you roll Dauntless and Dauntless works, then the troll is temporarily strength 5 for that punch. It actually says if the roll is equal or lower to the opponent, but I don't think it rolls on an equal strength. Maybe a bug in the game though. But basically, if you're punching a Black Orc, for example, that is strength 4, you roll a dice, and if Dauntless works, then you have strength 4 for that punch, meaning that you have a 1 die, or if you have a support, then you have a 2 die. And they have Frenzy, which basically means that whenever they throw a block, if it's better than a 2 down, they're going to automatically follow their opponent. And if it's a push, or if for whatever reason the player is still standing, they will punch again. Automatically, you can't control it. And same thing, they will follow if it's a push or better, and they'll stay where they are, of course, if it's a skull or a 2 down. So this can get you in trouble, especially if you're punching towards the end, at the edge of the field, because you may end up stuck on the edge. Also though, if you're punching forward, you may end up getting a little bit isolated as a Troll Slayer, so you have to be careful how you use Troll Slayers, because they're very easy to suddenly disappear from the team. So it's better to actually find a way to frenzy around a friendly piece, so you don't get too far away from the team. And their stats. Movement 5, which is very low, but it's quite high for a dwarf actually. Strength 3, which is average, Agility 2, which is below average, and Armor Value 8, which is average. These are one of the pieces that your opponent is going to target because the armor value is weaker than a standard dwarf, so you need to keep that in mind as well. And they have 2 heads. Then probably the star of the team. Blitzers are often stars of teams, and I think a lot of people would disagree that the Blitzer is the star of the team actually. I just realised, going back to the Troll Slayer quickly, they only have general and strength access as well. So the Blitzer then, with most teams, I would consider them the star of this team, but they need a bit of development before they really can do things. And they have general and strength access, so you can get all the Mighty Blow, etc. You can get tackle, etc. You can make them a Longbeard and also give them strength skills, basically. And they also have Fixed Skull and Block to start with, and later on you can be using them to support the rest of the team and to do damage, basically. That's their main role along with the Troll Slayer. The Troll Slayer's main role is to do damage, the Blitzer's main role is to do support and to safely blitz things, like in most teams. They also have Movement Allowance 5, they have Strength 3, Agility 3, and Armor Value 9. So another piece that can kind of maneuver in a dwarf team. And basically you want to be using the Blitzers and the Troll Slayers as much as possible. They are the pieces that are going to be trying to cause problems for the opposition and knocking out enemy pieces. You can actually use every dwarf for blocking though. That's the strength of the dwarf team. You should be rolling every block that you possibly can every turn. Because dwarves are the best team at actually wiping out the opposition, at least at first, and later on you can actually develop them to make them even better at it. Though you can actually develop them in a way that makes them incredibly strong defensively as well. But we'll get onto that in a little bit. So I'll talk about builds when I have the team in front. That's what I usually do. Next up we have the runner, who is actually the fast dwarf, which is a weird thing to say. They have access to general and passing skill, like the orc thrower, and they're about equally as good at the job as the orc thrower, but they're missing pass until you give it to them. So they have sure hands, which gives you a free reroll if you fail to pick up, and they have fixed skull as well, but they only have armor value 8, so there's a chance they're getting injured. They're one of the pieces that your opposition will target if they get the chance. And average strength and average agility. Now, they're still they're the only piece as well in the team that are missing block, so you want to give them block as quickly as possible. And the main role of the runner is ball handling. And if you're crazy, like me, then also passing. Though it's not really advisable to pass with dwarves unless absolutely necessary. A lot of players actually only take the one runner, and they use him as the primary ball carrier as the rest of the team protect him. So there is that to keep in mind. And then having a look at the Longbeard, who I said the Blitzer is the star player in this team, but actually I think the Longbeards are the star player, because they also have general and strength access, and they start with tackle, and there's lots of them. I think it's actually a very legitimate build to have all Longbeards and a runner, though it does mean that the team is going to run very slowly, because they only have movement 4, so you can't move them very far. They have strength 3, they have agility 2, so they can't handle the ball, and they have armor value 9, which keeps them nice and alive. And they have 3 skills: block, fixed skull, which we've looked at, and tackle, which is new. Tackle basically counteracts dodge. It counteracts dodge when you're hitting your opponent, and it counteracts dodge when they're trying to run away. So they can't reroll their dodge if they're trying to dodge out of your tackle zone, and if you get a pow or a stumble, then the dodge piece is going down because of tackle. So it's a very useful skill against teams like elves, against teams like Skaven, and against any team that can get a lot of dodge, basically. And this team is built to defeat that kind of team. So elves, etc. are going to struggle against dwarves once they've developed a bit. And yeah, that's it for the Longbeard. The last piece is the Death Roller. And the Death Roller is a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but if you're playing really seriously, you don't want a Death Roller. It's a piece that you automatically lose because of Secret Weapon. I'll get onto that in a second. And in general, it's just a piece that it's kind of difficult to know what to do with it in the team setup because it can't move very far. That's what makes it quite difficult to use. It has a movement of 4, like the majority of dwarfs. It has a really cool car though. It has strength 7, which is very, very strong, of course. It has agility 1, which is awful, and it actually can't pick up the ball at all because it has no hands, so there's no ball handling even if you really, really need it to. It can't. And it has armor value 10, which means it's definitely not going away. It has some interesting skills that we will have a look at right now, and it only has access to strength, so you need to roll a double to get the block, like on most big guys. It has break tackle, which basically means that if you do want to make a dodge, then the first time you attempt it, you dodge on a 7 as opposed to dodging on a 1. So it does have a chance to actually get out of a tackle zone if you really want to do that, but most times you want the Death Roller to stay where it is and hit the thing it's next to, especially if that thing has low armor. It has Dirty Player, which adds 1 to any armor roll or injury roll made by a player with a skill when they make a foul action or if a player uses them as a support in a foul action. Dirty Player is something that I know is very well touted in the Rebel League. I personally think it's a skill that you should use in moderation, but a lot of people use a lot of Dirty Player. But we'll get onto that when we're talking about tactics later on in this series. They have Juggernaut, which works kind of like a half block. If this player takes a blitz action, only when they blitz, then opposing players may not use their fend, stand firm, or wrestle skills against blocks. And if you do roll a 2 down, it's treated as if it's a push as opposed to a 2 down. So if you blitz with this piece, which is quite common with a death roller, then you kind of have a half. It's not really fair to say it's a half block, but you have something that does something similar to a block. Mighty Blow adds 1 to any armor or injury roll. No hands means he can't handle the ball. And Secret Weapon, this is where the death roller really falls down. As soon as somebody scores, or as soon as a half is over, the death roller is going to automatically be called out by the referee and sent off the pitch. If you don't have a bribe, that means that they're gone from the team for the rest of the game. If you do have a bribe, then you have a chance to keep him on the pitch, of course. So if you do have a death roller, then make sure you have a 12-man roster. He also has Stand Firm, which is a fantastic skill for a big guy and anybody who's strong, basically. And if somebody hits you with Stand Firm, they can't move you, basically, unless you let them. So if somebody takes a block against you and they get a push, then nothing happens, you stay exactly where you are. Or if they get a knockdown, you can go to the ground exactly where you are instead of moving backwards. This move can be used very tactically, and sometimes it can be ignored very tactically, so learn how Stand Firm works if you can. And he has Loner skill, which means he has to re-roll before he can re-roll. He has to roll before he can re-roll. Let's have a look at an actual build then. The most common build, I think, for Dwarves is the full positional build, where you have both Troll Slayers, both Blitzers, both Runners, 5 Longbeards, and 3 rerolls. This is probably the most standard Dwarf setup, and it's probably the safest, though you can decide to drop a Troll Slayer or drop a Runner based on your taste. And because the Troll Slayer and the Runner are the two that have the weaker armor value anyway, they're the pieces that you're more likely to drop. I actually have a coach who plays a lot of Dwarves, and he only ever plays with 1 Troll Slayer, and he's very good with Dwarves, so it's obviously a legitimate strategy. And there are lots of people who play with just the 1 Runner. The positive of having 2 Runners is if you lose one, then the other one can pick up the ball, because the rest of the team can't really handle. The Blitzers can handle almost as well, but they don't get that free reroll on the pickup. And if you're going to pass, which is not advisable, but I'm not unknown to do it, and other coaches aren't unknown to do it, then you do want to pass between 2 runners mostly, because they're just more likely to keep hold of the ball. And as for the way the team plays, you have a front line of Longbeards who basically hold the opposition line. If you can keep them relatively loose against any agility team, they're going to stop people from getting through the gaps, because they're pretty hard to put down, and also you can't easily dodge through tackle zones if you have the dodge skill. If you're on offense, then they want to basically be in the face of the opponent, and they want to be punching everything they possibly can all the time. And it's often advisable, but not always, to follow up. If you're punching in a straight line, it's always advisable to follow up. Not always, but often advisable to follow up, keeping the line nice and flat. If you're punching sideways, though, you have to make a tactical decision as to whether to follow or not. The runners stay in the back and they deal with the ball, and they also can be used to support each other as the screen. The blitzers, one of them is probably going to be blitzing, funnily enough, and the other one is probably going to be in support somewhere, maybe even in support of each other. That's usually quite a good strategy. And the Troll Slayers basically want to punch the thing that is standing on them and push them as far away from the rest of the team as possible. The Troll Slayers are good for causing havoc to the opposition structure. So if you have a team that has a very flat line, the Troll Slayer can disrupt that, but you've got to keep in mind that the Troll Slayer is moving out of position as well. So Troll Slayers are very good for basically splitting up an opposition team, and because you have 2 of them, it means you can move 2 turns every turn if you're doing a good job of basing your opponent. And in general, Dwarves want to base opponents. However, word of advice, when you're playing against an agility team, make sure you have at least 2 Dwarves in the background ready to deal with the pieces that can break through. Because as soon as something breaks through against a Dwarf team, Dwarves are not catching it. No way. You can't go chasing everything as a Dwarf, so you need to make sure that your front line is solid and nothing is getting through. If you can do that, you can defend against any team, but it takes a bit of practice, and it takes a lot of understanding of basic positioning. In terms of development, every piece wants guard. Every piece on the team, apart from the runners, want guard. It's very important. And every piece on the team wants Mighty Blow. Generally speaking, I would give every single Longbeard guard as the first level up. I would probably give the Blitzers guard as the first level up as well, and I would give the Trollslayers Mighty Blow, just to give me that bit of likely destruction against the opposition team and also the quick development. After guard, you can go Mighty Blow yourself. You can give tackle to the Blitzers, you can give tackle to the Trollslayers. You don't want to give too much piling on. You can give maybe one to one of the Trollslayers, but too much is a big problem. And mostly you want to be using all of the strength access skills on the Longbeards, so stand firm, grab, everything that keeps pieces locked up with the Longbeard, and so you can control the pitch. There aren't many basic skills that a Longbeard needs. It may be worth giving one of the runners kick-off return so they can get to the ball a little bit quicker. It may be worth giving one of the runners kick, so you have that extra little advantage when you are on the kicking side. Runners in general, the way I usually build them personally, though a lot of people don't, is I do build a thrower piece and I do build a catcher piece. Though it's difficult to do that, and it's difficult to make that tactic work. So the most common way is to make sure they are both ball protectors, so they have things like fend. They have block, of course. They can have pass block to cause problems to elf teams, and basically anything that can help them secure the ball and keep the opposition off them. And the blitzers are basically built as support pieces with the guard, with the tackle, and the Mighty Blow, trying to keep basically anything that does manage to break through, the blitzers deal with them. That's their main role. And the Trollslayers are designed to kill things, so the Mighty Blow, maybe the piling on, the guard, etc. But the Longbeards are there to stand in the way and make sure that nothing gets away from them, so pretty much any strength skill is useful for a Longbeard, apart from things like Strong Arm. You don't need that, but otherwise they're all pretty useful. So, having a look at a developed Dwarf team then, let's have a look at what the AI have done first. It's not usually a great thing to look at, but let's see what the most developed Dwarf team looks like, just so we can have a look at some skills and see how they've developed it. I didn't talk about the Death Roll as well, I will do that in a minute. So as you can see with the Longbeards, they have focused on taking strength pieces. We have 3 with guard and 3 with stand firm. That's not necessarily so bad. With stand firm, these pieces aren't moving from where they are on opposition turn, though all guard is more important, I would say personally. Both blitzers have been given Mighty Blow, one's been given guard, one's been given tackle. A lot of people would put Mighty Blow on a blitzer, but I personally think it's necessary on a Dwarf team, because you already have the ability to do damage to the team already. Though a lot of people would build them this way, it's true. Though I'd probably take the tackle and the guard before I took the Mighty Blow on both pieces. And the Trollslayers have been built, one as a damage dealer and one as a sacker. This is Strip Ball, which means it counteracts people's... which means that if you do block somebody, regardless of the result, you're going to make them drop the ball unless they have sure hands. That's another thing that sure hands does, it protects from Strip Ball. And both runners have been given block, which is quite common, and Death Roller has been given guard, which is its best original level up. But that's not such an interesting build. So if we have a look at the teams that I have actually as Dwarfs, I have a really strong Dwarf team. I'll have a look at that one in a minute, though I built it a long time ago, so it's not really ideally built. And if we have a look at my Wood Wars Dwarf team, they've only played 1 game. I have gone for the same build, but a Longbeard died, so nothing interesting there, really. And having a look at my overly developed and pretty disgusting Dwarf team. Where are they? There we go. So as you can see, I've played a lot of Dwarfs. I do have a 12-man roster, and I have taken the Death Roller mostly for fun purposes. I don't always use him though, sometimes he stays on the bench, at least until the second half. And let's have a look at the Longbeards first then. So, I actually took a lot of Mighty Blow first of all on my Longbeards. I took 2 lots of Mighty Blow, and I took 2 lots of Dodge because I rolled doubles, and Dodge is pretty disgusting on Dwarfs actually, and it's not something that people want to deal with. I did take guard later on, but normally when I build a Dwarf team I do take guard as the first skill on all Longbeards. And I have a Mighty Blow stand firm piece as well, so not only is this piece really difficult to put down, he's also not going anywhere, so unless you get a POW, This dwarf is standing exactly where he was when you punch him, which is really, really disgusting for any team to deal with. For the blitzers, I also rolled a dodge and I also rolled a 12, so we can ignore those two, but I did go tackle Mighty Blow, and then Mighty Blow guard and guard, which is kind of counter to what I said, but like I said, I built this team a long time ago before I was really used to playing dwarves. And I would probably take guard first on both blitzers as well, or guard tackle and then Mighty Blow as a second choice. The Troll Slayers are built a little bit more the way that I would, though I wouldn't normally take tackle first. Though I've taken tackle first on both of them, I've taken Mighty Blow second on both of them. I managed to roll dodge on one, I managed to roll guard on both, and I also have piling on one of the Troll Slayers, so this piece is designed to kill. And they're both designed as elf hunters. Then the two runners. The runners are kind of interesting. I have built the passing type runner, which is not necessarily advisable, but you will notice that both have been given block, first of all. It's quite important. This one's been given pass, which lets him reroll any failed pass action. He has accurate, which gives him a +1 to any pass action. He has nerves of steel, which means that if he's receiving, if he's passing, or if he's intercepting, not intercepting actually, I think, 1 second. And intercepting, yes, I was right. If he's next to an opposition player, there are no minus modifiers on any of those actions, pass, catch, or intercept. And he has tackle, just in case he does end up being a support piece. And he's also close to level 7, which is interesting. And he's my highest level player I've ever had, I think. Not ever had, actually. I had another dwarf runner, funnily enough, that was 173 when he died. So I'm hoping that the same isn't going to repeat here. And the second piece is a bit of a strange build, but still, he's more a anti-passing piece, where he can steal the ball if necessary. He rolled dodge, which was lucky, so he had a double. He has kick-off return to move himself into a position based off the opposition's kick, which is more favourable for our team. He has pass block, which means that if he's in a good position, then he has a better chance of intercepting an opposition pass. You also have the chance to move the player in, I think, 3 squares from where they're standing, so if you're not in a tackle zone, that can be quite useful as well. And he has dump off, which is quite a strange choice, but I chose it because mostly I want this guy holding the ball, and it's just the way the team is developed that he's been given dump off. And then the Death Roller. The Death Roller started off with guard. He rolled doubles, so he got block. He has grab, which means that when you tackle somebody, you choose which zone the opposition player goes into. There are some counteractions, but basically if there's no counteraction on the team, then you choose where the player goes after you block them. It works like sidestep, but in the opposite way. And he has multiple block, which means that he can block more than one piece each turn, though he takes a strength hit if he does do a couple of blocks. So that's it for Dwarf and Dwarf development. Let's have a look at some specific enemies then. No, wrong button. So, as the Dwarf team then, let's have a look at some specific enemies. The Human team is not a bad matchup for Dwarfs. The problem with the Human team is that they can run away from you, and they can cause some problems, but they're not really an agility-based team. So if you can stay in the Humans' way and also base to base with humans as much as possible, you're going to cause real big problems for the Human team. They can't outfight you, they can only outrun you. So the most important thing is to keep the humans in front of you and have a flat line of defense. We have a couple of pieces in the back, probably the blitzers. And the blitzers go chasing down those pieces that do manage to get through. Keep in mind though, even though blitzers are one of the best chasing pieces, along with the runners because they have movement 6, they can't chase anything that has movement 7, movement 8, movement 9. So you need to make sure that your front defense is solid and that there's enough gap between the blitzers or the runners that are in the back to deal with anything that is incredibly fast. So you want to keep something like 3 squares between your main defense and your secondary fallback defenders, and you only want a couple out of the line. You don't need more than that. That's humans. Facing off against orcs. This is one of these weird things where both coaches look at their opposition and they go, oh god, no. The orcs don't want to fight the dwarfs for reasons I said in the last match, but the dwarfs also don't want to fight the orcs. The orcs are slightly faster than them, which can cause some problems, though It only really causes problems if the orcs are good at using the flanks. If the orcs are trying to break through the middle, it doesn't make much of a difference, the speed. Though orcs do also have some strength advantages, especially in the form of black orcs. The Troll Slayer kind of counteracts that, because the Troll Slayer can match the orc strength for strength, but everything else is a bit weaker than the black orc, so it requires a couple of pieces to take out a black orc. However, because the dwarf has so much block, you can actually take one die blocks against the black orc quite safely. So there is that. Dwarf we're not going to look at. Playing against Skaven is a mixed feeling. On the one hand you go, yay, I'm going to kill things, and on the other hand you go, oh my god, how do I deal with the 9 movement? And Skaven are one of these perfect examples where your flatline has to be completely solid. And Skaven generally have to dedicate quite a lot of pieces to making a gap in a dwarf team. So it is a hard matchup for Skaven, but if you leave a big enough hole, Skaven will break through. And if you don't have pieces in the back to deal with that breakthrough, you're in a lot of trouble as dwarves. And against Skaven, it's really essential that you have a gap between your fullbacks and your front line of defense. If you don't leave a gap, then the Skaven are going to break through and you're not going to catch them. Though you do have tackle on most pieces, so you can deal even with the gutter runners quite successfully, and you only need one piece to knock a gutter runner out. So it's quite difficult for Skaven to defend their gutter runners from you. The High Elf team works in a similar way to Skaven, but they're slightly slower, but in the same way they want to get through you. They're slightly better at it than Skaven though, arguably. I don't know, they're about the same actually. Both have to deal with your front line in the same way. They have to use quite a few pieces to make a gap, and then send one of their faster pieces, Catcher in a High Elf team, through to the back. So same defense, one really solid front line and a couple of pieces in reserve just to deal with the fast pieces that do get through. One of my favourite things that happens against elves and against Skaven is that the coach tries to send pieces around the back, because it means they have these pieces that are all alone, and my dwarves that are already ready for them can just pick on them, whereas the front line keeps everything else in front of them. Dark Elves work very similar to the High Elves in this matchup. The only real difference is that the Dark Elves also have a frenzy piece, so you have to be wary of that. Dark Elves can actually make a mess of your strong defensive line with their witches, so you need to be able to counter that by playing nice and tight and making it difficult for a witch elf to get a decent block on a piece, basically. Bretonnians. I've never played a game as dwarves against Bretonnians where the Bretonnians didn't all get killed. So I will say that. Bretonnians still have the slight speed advantage though, but to be honest I don't think Bretonnians have an answer for dwarves at all. I think that Dwarfs is probably the scariest thing for a Bretonnian team to see, though if anybody is a big Bretonnian coach, or if anybody has had problems with Bretonnians, then please comment below. I've never actually played as Bretonnians against Dwarfs, so I'm not sure how I would deal with that. I'm going to have to play that before I look at the Bretonnian team, actually. And yeah, I don't know what to say. I think Bretonnians are one of the things that you see and you go, okay, this game's maybe not easy, but this game is going to probably go my way. With Chaos, early on, they're a pretty good matchup because they have no skills and they don't really have a way of breaking through your line, they don't have a way of running around you even. It's kind of a hard matchup, though Chaos are quite strong, and they do have those horns, which means their blitz is always going to be pretty solid against you. When Chaos are playing against you, it's kind of a war of attrition, and they're one of the only teams that have a similar armor value line to you, with the 4 Chaos Dwarves with armor value 9. Chaos Warriors with armor value 9, sorry. Though, early on Chaos are going to struggle against you. Though when they've developed a little bit, Chaos are one of the worst things to see, because they have all of this Mighty Blow, all of this Claw. They can really counteract Dwarves in this regard. So you need to be careful about dealing with Chaos. When you're dealing with a low-level team, you want to get in their face and fight them a lot. When you're dealing with a high TV team, you've got to be more careful about the way you deal with them, and it's going to be kind of a dance off between trying to pick blocks where you can and trying not to end up standing on the pieces that can cause you trouble. But the Chaos are always going to chase you down. You have to basically make sure that they're blitzing you as opposed to blocking you, which is weird because it's not how Dwarfs want to play. Wood Elves work in the exact same way as Skaven, basically. You want to keep the very solid front line, and you want to keep the few pieces in reserve. And I haven't really been talking about attack, but the Dwarf attack in general is quite straightforward. You want to push your way up the line, slowly, knocking out anything you can in the process. So block everything you possibly can, and move the ball up 1 or 2 spaces each turn until the final turn. Lizardmen, when they don't have the skills, they're not so worrying, though they do have 6 Saurus and a Croxagore that are all stronger than all of your pieces, so the Troll Slayers are very essential in dealing with the Lizardmen. The Troll Slayers should be punching one of the big guys every single turn, and the Longbeards or Blitzers should be targeting down a Skink. Longbeards preferably, because Longbeards have tackle. And the Lizardmen really want to keep the Skinks away from you, and Skinks can get away from you because they're pretty fast. So if you have a Skink that's close enough to you, make sure you block it. If you have a Skink that's far enough back, then leave it alone and make sure it's not getting through your line. As for Norse and Dwarves kind of do the same thing in general, but Norse cannot handle the attritional war between Norse and Dwarves, so Norse have to kind of stand off you in this game, even though they'd rather be fighting. But if they do get into a fight with you, that's good news for you, because you can completely demolish their team of armor value 7. The one thing that's a real problem is the Yeti, because the Yeti has Claw, so he does have the ability to render your army useless. And the 2 Ulfariners can also surf you off the pitch, so when you're playing tight, you've kind of got to leave a small gap on the flank where pieces can get through. When I'm playing against Norse, I usually play with 2 lines of defense and also a fullback. So the Norse are kind of forced to play the flanks, and I can hopefully surf the team into submission. But the flat line doesn't work as well with Norse because they have counteracting measures to deal with that. Against Undead, Undead are going to play in pretty much the same way as you. You're both going to kind of stand on each other and be in the way. They're going to try and get their ghouls through though, so you need to make sure that you have something to deal with the ghouls at the back, as you do with any other agility-based team. Undead are not agility-based, but the ghouls are agility-based. And you want the Troll Slayers to take on the mummies as much as possible, and everything else can deal with the zombies and the wights. The undead don't really have any huge advantage over you, but at the same time you don't really have any huge advantage over the undead. It's kind of an even matchup when you two are facing off against each other. Necromantic is kind of different, however, because they do have the wolves, and the wolves actually serve 2 purposes that are a huge issue for your dwarves. Their claw piece means that they can actually do damage to every single one of your pieces quite successfully. And the wolves also have frenzy, which means that they can make a real mess of your defensive line. So Necromantic are one of the hardest teams to defend against, because you have to play in the similar 2-line system as I mentioned with the Norse, where you have 2 lines, you leave the flanks slightly open and you leave someone in the back, and they are going to be attacking the flanks. However, the way Necromantic really want to play is they're going to have a flat line against you, and the wolves are going to work like a hammer to the every other piece anvil. And it's kind of a problem for dwarves. So basically you need to target the wolves. If the wolves are coming in and starting a fight with you, make sure that you're hitting it back every single turn, so it has to think twice about where it's placing itself. And if you don't keep things close to the flanks, it means they can't surf, so they have to actually push you in to your defense as opposed to out of it. And it's really not what a wolf wants to be doing, so you want to make sure that the wolves have as little to do as possible when you're playing as dwarves. And the ghouls and the wolves both can get round the flank and out of the way, so that's where your back line is most useful, dealing with those few pieces. Basically the goal is knock out the wolves. If you can do that, then you'll be fine. with Nurgle. Nurgle is an interesting matchup because Nurgle mostly focus on stopping opposition from passing and stopping opposition from blocking. And what you want to do is make sure that the entire opposition is base to you all the time. So I think that Nurgle's counteractions don't really work on a Dwarf team, because when I'm a Dwarf coach against a Nurgle team, I really don't mind that I haven't managed to create a block, especially when I've got all of the guard already. All I mind is that everything on the Nurgle team is standing next to a Dwarf, and that makes me happy. But they are faster than you, as all teams are, so flatlining is usually the best idea. And basically war of attrition, because you're more likely to win it, and the rot of death is real. You can really do some damage to a Nurgle team if they are willing to go toe-to-toe with you. Khemri is not really such a big deal for the Dwarves. The only problem is that they do have those 4 really strong Tomb Guards who can make a mess of your defensive line, so you need to be able to deal with that. Even though I want to say flatline against Khemri, I actually think it's better to play 2 lines against Khemri. I don't really have a lot of experience playing as Dwarves against Khemri, to be honest, though when I'm thinking about the 2 rosters, it might be better to actually have 2 lines of defense and try and keep the Tomb Guards separate from each other and basically pick off the skeletons as you go. And if you have 1 Dwarf standing on 1 Tomb Guard a lot of the time, then that's probably a good thing, because you're just locking up the Tomb Guard, and they don't have Mighty Blow, so they're not too likely to do damage to your pieces. So just try and keep the Tomb Guards locked up, and try and focus down the skeletons. And try and keep them locked up separately. That's the key. And Troll Slayers should be hitting the Tomb Guards whenever they can. And Chaos Dwarves, it's the Dwarf off. Now Chaos Dwarves have some unusual advantages over you, where they have these really, really fast and strong pieces, and you need to make sure that you can deal with them. There's only 6 Dwarves on the Dwarf team, so you don't need to worry too much about them. Your Longbeards can usually match off against the Chaos Dwarves and not really have too much of an issue, though they can have Claw with a little bit of development, so you have to be aware of that. The Hobgoblins are the things that you want to basically break down, and then you have to deal with the Bull Centaurs. So again, have pieces way back in reserve, and maybe have 3 against Chaos Dwarves, so you can effectively deal with the Bull Centaurs. If you can get your Troll Slayers onto the Bull Centaurs though, all the better. Always try and get Troll Slayers to match off against Bull Centaurs, because then you just need the 1 support piece. So maybe against Chaos Dwarves, actually keeping the Troll Slayers in reserve is better than keeping the Blitzers and Runners in reserve. And that's it. That's all of the teams. I have done this one pretty early in the morning, and I didn't look at the system before, so if it is any different, I apologize, but I think I covered everything that I've covered in the other 2 videos so far. If you have any further comments about Dwarfs, then please leave them below, even if you want to tell me how disgusting this Dwarf team is, because it is pretty disgusting. And otherwise, thank you all for watching. Bye bye for now.